I'm a leg training minimalist. I don't want the biggest or strongest legs, but I couldn't live with myself if I skipped legs entirely. That's why choosing the best exercises is so important for getting results. By progressing the deadlift, you're going to build a solid pair of legs and well-rounded full body strength, which is unique to this exercise. There's no excuse why every single one of you can't deadlift 2 times your body weight. Here's how. Despite working out for so long, the deadlift is new to me. I'm a beginner in this lift. In 2024, a year ago, I was deadlifting 100 kilos for 3 sets of 8. Fast forward a year later, I'm now deadlifting 160 kilos for 3 sets of 8. I really struggled with the deadlift when I was first learning because it's a difficult exercise. It takes a lot of skill, coordination, where your body is in space, trying to learn how to brace against resistance, and trying to learn that hip hinge was always really, really difficult. And there's one thing that I've learned about this movement is that progress takes time, especially these big, heavy compound lifts. You're going to feel awkward at start. It's going to be really challenging for you. And that's cool because we've got to play the long game with this stuff. Learning won't be an overnight journey, but that's what's part of the fun, that process of iterative understanding of your body, getting stronger over time, seeing the changes in your physique is really powerful with deadlift specifically. Using too much weight is a rookie mistake. Let's face it, we get excited with deadlifts. We just want to push ourselves to the absolute limit all the time, but it's not the smartest thing. If you use too much weight, your form tends to break down. Your range of motion often suffers too, and it's not the best when it comes to building muscle. If you're going way too heavy on deadlifts, you'll find yourself absolutely cooked after 1 set or even 2 sets. This state shows that you're probably using too much weight and or pushing yourself too hard. It's this delicate balance of choosing a weight that's challenging but not excessive, not stupid ego lifting that we commonly see online. Poor bracing and a lack of core engagement is super common with deadlifts. You'll see people flexing, they're turning this into just a back lift. It just looks really, really ugly, increases the chance of injury, pain, if you're not used to loading your body in this way. The simple fix is to engage your core and be really mindful about your posture as well as your bracing. You want to get that big belly breath. You want to focus on the hip hinge by shooting the hips up and back to stretch and put tension on that posterior chain. You'll be able to brace correctly and not turn yourself into a question mark when you're doing your deadlifts. I'm guilty of this. When the weight gets heavier, I start to compensate and use different movement strategies, probably my quads, trying to use a lot more glutes and shifting it away from the hamstrings. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just something that you want to try and improve over time. We'd love to have that textbook hip hinge where we've got that consistent knee angle throughout the whole thing. That shows absolute dominance over the exercise. And it's a mix of not being strong enough because you're probably lifting too much weight or you're a bit fatigued, but also a mindfulness thing. You have to treat every single rep with the respect that it deserves. Deadlifts, they're a huge compound exercise, full body. You're handling and shifting lots of weight. You really need to be on top of what your body is doing, what your knees are doing, that hip hinge. Otherwise, the deadlift will take you along for the ride. You want to take the deadlift along for a ride. Letting the bar drift away from the body is such a beginner mistake, and it's something simple that you can change to make your deadlifts way better. I think that beginners let the bar go away from them because they're a bit scared of the knurling touching their skin and it being rough, and maybe they're going to hurt themselves. But in actual reality, the further the bar is away from your body, the weaker you are, the poorer your leverages are, the more stress that you've got going through your lower back. And the simple fix is just to keep that bar really close to your body, if not rubbing. That's what we'd prefer. Having the bar touch the shins and also the lower thighs as you move through your RDLs. It's going to keep your technique consistent. You'll be as strong as possible and you'll be deadlifting like a pro. Not controlling the eccentric lowering phase of an RDL is the biggest sin there possibly is. I would stress the importance of having that controlled eccentric of around 2 to 4 seconds. This is something where it doesn't have to be extremes. I don't want your eccentric taking half a second on an RDL, but you also don't need to spend 10 seconds absolutely milking every single centimeter. Use your best judgment. It should be controlled, and that is plenty to get the best from the exercise. Resting is something that many people get wrong when it comes to deadlifts. They often don't rest long enough, they're under recovered, their performance suffers their strength gain is not as good as it could be and is reflected in their physique too. At a minimum, resting for 3 minutes is going to restore most of your energy in your body so that you're ready to have that next set with good effort. But there's nothing wrong with resting 5+ minutes or even up to 10 minutes. Yes, it might sound crazy to start with, but as you lift heavier weights and you get stronger, your deadlifts are going to be so much more fatiguing that you're going to need this full rest to reach your potential. 1, your cardio is likely going to be spent if you're doing high time under tension, moderate reps. This full body nature of deadlifts is taxing. You're going to be breathing really heavy and hard. And if you start your set when your cardio hasn't even recovered, you're not going to get your best results on that next set. We're not doing deadlifts as a cardio form. This isn't 2010 CrossFit. We want to get strong with this lift, so you got to respect that rest period. The simple reason we need long rest is because of nervous system recovery. We're trying to restore that ATP, PC, energy system of our body so that we're able to produce tons of force, maximize our strength, and get the most out of our deadlifts. Restoring your mental focus after you've done a hard deadlift set is one of the major benefits of resting 3+ minutes. You got to get your mind right. You've just done something really hard. You've pushed your body near its limits. You're going to need time to get focused again, concentrate, try and visualize yourself attacking the weights, getting those numbers that you've set for yourself. If you just rest less than 3 minutes between a hard deadlift set, there's just no way you'll be mentally locked in, laser focus on what you have to do. What's the rush? You've taken all this time to drive to the gym, work up to your top working weight on your deadlifts. Do yourself full justice by making sure that you're well recovered before each battle of the deadlift. Double progression is my favorite way of increasing reps as well as weight consistently when it comes to your workouts. It's a method of progressive overload that involves increasing both reps and weight over time in a structured way. Instead of always adding weight every session, you first increase reps within a given range before progressing to a heavier load. You want to set a rep range, for example, 8 to 15 reps. You're then going to choose a weight that is manageable for you to hit that minimum rep amount. In this example, 8 reps. Each workout, your goal is to progressively increase the reps towards the upper range. For example, 15 in this case. Once you hit the top range for all sets, you're going to increase the weight. For example, 2.5 to 5 kilos. Now you're going to repeat the process with this increased weight, working your way once again to the upper limit. Here's an example from my own workout that I did using double progression as a way to increase my reps as well as my weight long term. You can see that I keep the sets the same throughout every single week for simplicity, so that I'm not hiding from doing the work by just adding an extra set and going through the motions. This is probably the most sustainable way of making progress consistently week after week. And if you zoom out, double progression allows you to get the best of both worlds, increasing that volume with higher reps, but also increasing the intensity and getting stronger. The 2-set strategy for progressing deadlifts is my best kept secret, because when I do 3 sets of deadlifts, especially towards the end of a training phase, I start to get into junk volume. That 3rd set, the quality is just not there. I can't physically and mentally push myself close to my limits because I'm too tired. That's the hard truth of it. Whereas if I'm doing 2 sets, it's so much easier for me to muster up the courage week in, week out to approach that deadlift bar with the tenacity that it deserves. And I can milk progress for so much longer with the 2 sets. You gotta remember, the deadlift is a special exercise. It is a huge stressor to the body. And if you do 2 quality sets and you're consistently applying progressive overload, that's going to be plenty for you to make gains. Everyone can muster up the physiological and psychological arousal to get G'd up for 2 sets of deadlifts, but having to do that for 3 sets as you get really, really strong and you're pushing yourself at a higher RPE, can face problems. Here's why I prefer Romanian deadlifts over deadlifts from the floor. The Romanian deadlift has an emphasis on the eccentric or lowering phase. This creates more of those micro tears and muscle damage, which is important for building muscle. Plus, a slow, controlled descent increases that time under tension that your muscles are working under, more of that mechanical tension added up, which is really valuable for growth. By contrast to the conventional deadlift, you're just doing the concentric off the ground and you're dropping the bar back down towards the floor. From a strength perspective, this is great. because you get to lift heavier weights, but you're skipping out on that muscle building negative. There's more posterior chain emphasis when it comes to RDLs because we're doing that hip hinge pattern. We're putting a ton of that stress onto our posterior chain muscles, the glutes, the hamstrings. Conventional deadlifts tend to be more quad focused, and because we're lifting as much weight as we can, the body's going to use whatever technique feels most strong in the moment. And especially as fatigue sets in, you're going to use different movement strategies and bias different muscles just to get the weight up, which is cool for strength. But from hypertrophy, there's something that may be lacking. The stretch, man, that is where the RDL absolutely shines as an exercise. We're getting into that lengthened position, getting our muscles under tension in the stretch has been shown by countless hypertrophy studies to be a key element for building as much mass as you can. RDLs tend to suit the hypertrophy rep range from my experience. Doing your 5 to 15 on RDLs just feels great. You get that sweet spot of weight, intensity, volume that you can accrue to maximize your growth. By contrast to conventional deadlifts, they tend to be done in the 1 to 5 rep range to prioritize strength. Of course, you can do conventional deadlifts for really high reps, but there's a lot of cheating there. It turns into endurance. You might be bouncing it off the ground. You're getting cardio at that point. With a conventional deadlift, we're lifting as heavy as we can, low rep ranges. That's really going to tax your nervous system to the max. And with your concentric only deadlifts, you're missing out on the stretch and you're missing out on the eccentric. So for hypertrophy, if that is your goal, RDLs are a winner in my book. I like deadlifting without a belt for a few reasons. I find you build a stronger core if you deadlift without a belt. Your abs are forced to work harder, your obliques, your deep stabilizers. You've got to create all of that intra-abdominal pressure by yourself because you're not relying on an external support to do it for you. You'll also build a stronger lower back if you deadlift without a belt, because these areas are forced to stabilize your spine, keep you stiff as you deadlift through range, the spinal erectors and deep lower back muscles. It forces me to use weights that are within my means and within my control. And I've found over this past year that's led to lower risk of injury and pain because I'm always at the threshold of what my body can actually do, as opposed to putting on an external support, getting a false sense of security, getting excited because I've got this artificial strength and maybe pushing my body too hard. I prefer a more conservative, raw-based approach, especially when it comes to hypertrophy. Raw deadlifts without a belt teaches you how to brace naturally. I want to be able to create all that intra-abdominal pressure, know where my spine is in space, be able to hold that plank-like position off my own accord without having to rely on anything external. Learning this proper breathing with the Valsalva maneuver and core engagement really translates to every other gym lift that you do, which is why that hard work with deadlifts without a belt, it's worth its weight in gold because it will benefit your other lifts. I deadlift with straps because my back muscles, my legs are so much stronger than my grip. But Daniel, you're a hypocrite. Before you said you don't do deadlifts with a belt, but now you're using equipment with straps. What gives? It's a different case here because the limitation of what our posterior chain muscles can do is heavily limited by our capacity of our grip. One day I made the rookie mistake of forgetting my straps at home. They weren't in my gym bag. Instantly, anxiety, fear, dread, it all set in. I knew this workout was going to be wasted because I just can't lift as much weight if I'm not using straps. And I was curious to see by how much. I can usually deadlift 160 for 8 rep sets. I was warming up and I got towards 140 kilos and I knew I was in trouble. I was only able to do 5 reps before my grip gave out. I was just starting to lose that grip and it was really frustrating because my back, my legs, they had so much more to give. Now, if you don't want your grip to be weak as a kitten, here's what you can do. Do your warm-up sets without straps. This may be 3 or 4 sets before you get to your working weight. This is a decent amount of stimulus onto your grip, so that's not being neglected entirely. You can also do dedicated grip exercises to strengthen this weak link. Things for your flexors like wrist curls, hanging. These targeted accessories are great if you're worried about weakness in terms of strength or lack of muscle size in your flexors. If you want a well-rounded physique that's muscular and strong, you've got to have the correct program. Check out FitnessFAQs.com. We'll teach you how to mix the muscle building effects of weights with the freedom of movement of calisthenics. Deadlifts are the most taxing exercise that I've ever done, but difficult will transform you. and it's definitely going to put hairs on your chest, develop some physical and mental fortitude that is going to carry over to every other exercise that you do. But they're really tiring. They take so much out of you because they're a full body exercise. You've got the grip component as well. You've got the axial loading going through your spine when you're working against heavy weights. It's such a huge stressor on your body, and there's so much muscle mass involved. You've got your back, you've got your core, you've got your lower body muscles such as your glutes and hamstrings. Especially when you're grinding out reps close to failure, it's such a fatiguing movement, but also a ton of stimulus. Let's talk about it. Some of the signs and symptoms that you may be getting too excited on deadlifts and pushing yourself too hard is that CNS fatigue. We can all relate to it after a heavy deadlift session. We finish and we're like a zombie. We can barely get through the rest of our workout. We get in the car, we've got that mental brain fog as we drive home, let alone trying to do a work day afterwards. You're not as mentally there as you normally are because of this huge systemic stress. It takes so much out of you. Disturbed sleep is a sign that you may be overreaching or overtraining with your deadlifts. I know this has happened to me towards the end of a cycle when I'm pushing myself towards the maximum weights, high RPE, high effort relative to failure. When I'm in bed that night, I'm just there laying and I'm languishing in misery as my body is completely fatigued. I'm sitting there next to my partner and she's like, "What are you doing there just rolling around?" Little does she know that I've just been beasting out on deadlifts all day, and that explains my state of being. And I often have issues both getting to sleep as well as staying asleep if I've been doing heavy deadlifts too often and not doing deloads and managing my program. And I don't have this issue with upper body days. I find that on the days I deadlift hard and heavy, it's correlated with some sleep disturbance. Man, the DOMs and the weakness after deadlifts, it just hits different. Everything from my grip to my back to my legs feels fatigued and tired and sore as well. I'm just not as fast just doing activities of daily living, getting up off the chair, ascending stairs. And I don't want you to hear this as a negative. It's just a sign that you're pushing your body to new limits and something to be aware of in terms of managing your program. Here's my best strategies for managing the taxing nature of deadlifts and getting results and super compensating when you do them. You have to patiently progress. The deadlift isn't an exercise that you want to rush. You should start with a manageable weight, a low RPE, training well shy of failure. This way you can give yourself a long runway of like 8 weeks of progressing reps as well as weight before you have to deload. Guys, repeating the same deadlift workout for a week or two, the exact same, is really underrated. It's going to get rid of that fatigue. It's going to restore and recover you, and you'll be itching to come back to increase reps and increase weight naturally, returning that passion for deadlifting. You can't expect to linearly progress forever. Sometimes the best thing that you can do is the same thing. Don't feel insecure. You don't have to give 1,000% every single workout. The body doesn't work that way. The deadlift is the one exercise that has transformed my body more than anything else. The mental toughness gains are night and day. I can really tell that I'm so much better at overcoming fear, hesitation, and having the balls to approach that bar week in, week out, try and increase my reps, increase my weight when it scares me. Because when you're doing these heavy deadlifts, you need to get into this state of mind where you're going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be painful. And by embracing this knowingly and doing this consistently week after week, you get these small wins with yourself, and the benefit translates to every other exercise in your program. It's so much easier to do a pull-up with a high level of effort, some push-ups, some bench press, or, isolation. How much of a breeze is doing some curls and extensions if you're used to pushing yourself on deadlifts? In the past, I used to struggle with lower back pain. Randomly, every few months, I would feel a tweak in my back. I'd feel weak, hesitant, and it'd take a month or so to recover before I felt fine again there. And since introducing deadlifts this last year, I haven't had any back pain. Touch wood. This is likely because of the increased resilience in my posterior chain, more strength in my spinal erectors in the lower back, posterior chains on point, as well as just getting better at bracing, having that core strength to teach my body that it's safe. And by getting stronger at these deadlifts, I've built up the tissue tolerance and resistance to these stresses through my lower back. And it's been really uplifting. Not having this back pain, it's freeing to be able to train how I want, when I want, without being limited by any of these annoying injuries that come up. Since deadlifting regularly, I've noticed a transformation in my physique. My glutes are bigger, my hamstrings are heftier, my spinal erectors look like steel pillars on the back, and I never got this from my conventional calisthenics and general weightlifting for the upper body. With this minimalist approach, you're not taking the easy way out. You're dedicating yourself to a lift and putting your consistent effort into getting stronger. And there's just no way that your physique is not going to adapt as a byproduct of this extra stress. My physique deadlifting 160 kilos now for reps and sets is clearly going to be more aesthetic, more muscular compared to the 100 kilo deadlift Danny. The deadlift has taught me to respect recovery. If you're not taking your nutrition, your sleep, as well as your programming seriously, the deadlift will destroy you. You're not going to be able to show up each week and improve on your previous numbers. With all the other exercises in my workout, there's more room for complacency and not trying to dot your I's and cross your T's. With the deadlift, if you work too hard, you face some overreaching problems. If you're not pushing it hard enough, you won't progress either. But if you're willing to invest the effort into learning about this movement, which if you're this far into a video, you take your training seriously. So join me along for the deadlift journey, and I'd love to hear what progress you've made with this exercise. Please check in. Hearing what you've been able to achieve in your own journey really does motivate me and the people around us. Cheers, legends. Your next job is to watch this video here so that you can become the best version of yourself. Let's get it. Come on.